I'm Amanda Fuller. I'm the Executive Director of the Kentucky Academy of Science. Thank you all for being here today. It's great to see so many people here in the room. We are recording, so if you are comfortable, putting yourself on camera and you want to be with us with your face, that's great. If you don't, that's okay too. But we are recording this, and we will make it available for folks who cannot be with us today. This is the third year we've done these workshops, and so it's great that it's been growing and that more people are signing on every year. We think it's wonderful that we can offer this opportunity for our members and for folks who maybe aren't members. So if you found out about this as a Kentucky Academy of Science member, that's great. That's exactly why we're here for you. If you found out about it from other channels, I would encourage you to go to our website and seriously consider becoming a member of the Kentucky Academy of Science. If you are at one of our higher education institutions in Kentucky, probably membership is free for you, and you can find out more about that at kyscience.org. We are a community of about 4,500 scientists and students and professionals across the Commonwealth. We have a lot of opportunities like this where you can connect with other scientists, maybe build some professional skills. We have volunteer opportunities. We have job opportunities and funding opportunities in our newsletter every month. And I would really encourage you to get involved and find out more about it. So thanks for being here today. I will turn it back over to Rob and offer my profound thanks and appreciation to Rob Weber, who's our Communications and Policy Director, for putting this program together this year and in the last couple of years as well. It's a great program, and Rob, I really appreciate y'all doing this for our members.
Thank you much, Amanda. I also would like to introduce the chair of the Kentucky Academy of Science Policy Committee, who is also a former president of the Kentucky Academy of Science, Trent Garrison.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Did you want me to just talk a little bit about our biweekly meetings?
Please.
Yes. So we usually have monthly meetings, but because the session is going on, it's a long session, 60-day session. I'm sure Rob's going to talk about that going on right now up through April. We are meeting biweekly, twice a month on Wednesdays at 12:30 p.m., I do believe. We have a core group of about somewhere between maybe 5 and 10 people who are easy to get along with and friendly and very, very helpful and knowledgeable when it comes to science policy. So what we do is, for the most part right now, this time of year anyway, is we take the approximately 1,000 bills that are going to come out of Frankfurt, and we distill just the science bills out. Rob does a really good job of that, and we go through those and we talk about them. What's important to us, what's important to our members. We actually rank them. And they eventually make it to our website. So we have a really good website that charts where bills are, as with science-related bills, as they're moving through the system, thanks to Rob. So if you're interested in joining us, we'd be really happy to have you. If you have any questions about that, feel free to. What would be the best way? Send you a message, Rob, or email, or me, or anyone is fine.
Yes, exactly. Either one. And at the end of my presentation, I think I show my email address, so that will be available to all, but as well as people can contact you.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining. I'll hand it back over.
All right. Thank you much. So just to give everyone an idea of how the meeting is going to unfold today, I'm going to start by giving a bit of an overview of this year's Kentucky General Assembly session, which just started this month. And then at around 12:30, we're going to be joined by a legislator, Representative Lisa Wilner, who's going to talk a bit about what she is keeping an eye on this session. And then we are going to hear from a student advocate with the Science and Policy Outreach Group at UofL to talk about the work that they're doing. It's always instructive to hear exactly how students are having success with advocacy, because it helps other students see the way forward on the same issue. And then And then I'll wrap things up by just offering some tips on ways you can stay connected with the legislative process and have an impact on that process. So as an introduction to the General Assembly's 2024 legislative session, this year's session, it's a 60-day session, 60 working days. So that's considered a long session. In even numbered years, we have these long sessions. In odd number years, they are half as long, 30 days. The biggest thing that distinguishes this year's session from the shorter sessions is that this is the year that lawmakers put together the next 2-year budget that will guide all state spending and set priorities for our state. So as we head into this session, the political layout of the land is that in both the House and the Senate, there are Republican super majorities. So if they band together, they're able to pass largely anything that they prefer to pass. And that also gives them the numbers to override any gubernatorial vetoes of legislation, if any of those are handed down. Obviously, our governor's a Democrat. All our other constitutional officers are Republicans. So we've got a strong Republican majority in Kentucky, but not complete dominance, because the top office is obviously held by a Democrat. So the Kentucky General Assembly, it largely mirrors the state as a whole, particularly some of the changes we've seen in the state in recent years, where the Democrat, what used to be the Democratic majority, has shrank to a minority and has actually shrank to the point now where almost all the Democrats in the General Assembly are from the urban areas, Lexington, Louisville, Northern Kentucky, or a few of the other larger cities. But there's really only about a couple rural Democrats left in the legislature. So as I mentioned, the Republicans have super majorities, the strongest level of power they've had in our state history. Just to give you an idea where we're at now as it relates to what happened in last year's session, in the 2023 legislative session. Some of the main issues of that session were efforts to save lives by getting automated external defibrillators in schools to take care of students or athletes or teachers who are having heart issues. Nuclear energy got a lot of attention in last year's session, and lawmakers created a working group to try to look at ways that nuclear energy might possibly come to Kentucky. If that ever happens, I can tell you that's a long, huge process that would be leading up to it, with millions of dollars of costs that would need to be laid out for infrastructure and training. Multi-year process. These huge projects often have uncertain price tags that grow over time. So the lawmakers interested in that have sort of taken a first big step on what would be a long process if we ever do end up with nuclear energy production in Kentucky. Obviously, in Kentucky, there's still a lot of support among legislators for the coal industry, and they passed a bill in last year's session that would make it harder for the state to approve the closure of coal-fired power plants. So companies running these plants might be looking at shifting to natural gas or something else, but they now have new hurdles to overcome before they could do that as a result of legislation. There's been some interesting efforts in recent years to improve literacy instruction in Kentucky. There are scientifically proven better ways to teach children how to read than what the state has focused on in the past. And lawmakers have made a huge effort to get us to turn towards this science of reading, evidence-based approach. So that's something that we're seeing in schools across the state. But it takes time. It's a process to get there. And probably one of the bigger issues last year, I'm going to finish naming two of the biggest issues, really. Last year, lawmakers approved a medicinal cannabis program for Kentucky, which actually doesn't start operating until 2025, but seeing that come to Kentucky after years of legislative leaders not preferring it was sort of a hurdle that was many years in the coming. And the other big issue of the session that got tons of attention was when lawmakers passed what ended up being described as one of the most strong anti-transgender bills in the nation, where they took aim both at providing medical services to minors who, needed things like hormone therapy or puberty blockers. And then they also focused on what's happening in schools and said things. They made rules about bathroom usage in schools and said that the Department of Education can't recommend to teachers that they respect students' preferred pronoun usage. So that's what we came out of the last session seeing happen. As we head into this year's session, which started in early January, the big issue is definitely going to be the passage of the state budget, because we're talking about the way billions of dollars will be spent in Kentucky. Most of those billions of dollars are coming down from the federal government, and they are going to specific programs and services. So they're not discretionary funds where lawmakers can sort of wrangle over where they go. Their destination is already set. There is a smaller pot of money, which is still millions and millions of dollars, where lawmakers do have some say in where it goes. And with that pot of money, most of it goes into education, but there's still money for roads, project services. That's where a lot of the legislative debate takes as far as what the priorities are going to be. The state has the largest rainy day fund budget reserves in our history. So in addition to the normal budget revenue stream, we've got a huge pot of money that lawmakers also had last year, but chose not to dip into. They purposefully wanted to build up this rainy day fund. This year, they say they are going to spend some of the money out of this fund. So there's the debate over how much should be spent and where it should go. Basically, everyone with a wish list in this state, whether it's for better support for childcare or land conservation, they're asking for this money to be spent on a whole list of things. I think the legislative leaders have indicated their approach is going to be more restrained, focused perhaps more on infrastructure type things, broadband, water lines, things of that nature. So we'll see the debate over how much of the rainy day fund, that debate will continue. Some of the issues that have grabbed headlines in the early days of the session. Well, before I go on to that, I'll just mention, back on the topic of the budget, the governor has put out his budget proposal and given a budget address to explain his proposed budget plan. Lawmakers have also unveiled their plans to have their own budget proposal that will differ from the governor's. And this is the same thing that happened last year. Obviously, there's different spending priorities. Last year, lawmakers essentially set the governor's plan aside and went with their own plan with some input from the executive branch. But I think we can expect that's what's going to happen this year as well. The legislative version of the budget will move forward with lawmakers saying they will have some back and forth conversation with the governor's office to make sure the plan serves the state well. So the issues that have grabbed headlines early in the session, there has been a major crime bill introduced. There has been legislation that would sort of change the way members are appointed to the Board of Education, which sets policies that govern school districts across the state. Currently, the governor appoints members of the State Board of Education. The bill would propose making those elected positions. So depending on your point of view about this issue, it's either a way of giving people a greater say in their Board of Education members, or it is politicizing the board that oversees our schools. Since we're still early in the session, none of these bills have taken great steps forward of clearing a committee or going to a chamber for a vote yet. I mentioned before that last year the anti-trans bill was approved. That's Senate Bill 150. That is the subject of lawsuits, a couple different lawsuits, both on the medical side of the issue of denying recommended medical care to minors in our state. And then there's also a lawsuit on the education side of the bill, as far as putting restriction on schools or on what they can be advised regarding pronoun usage and the bathroom setup in the schools. So two different lawsuits. We don't know where they're going yet. Whether or not that will prompt new legislative approaches to the issue, we're sort of in a wait and see approach on that in that regard. However, we can expect legislation to sort of clean up some language that was approved in last year's bill. There was some dispute where lawmakers wanted to give schools a couple different bits of guidance, or actually directives, regarding sex education in the state. The language in the legislation, they meant to say schools must do this and that, but the legislation actually says schools must do this or that. So the Department of Education told schools, take this literally, you can choose one or the other. Lawmakers say that's not what we intended. They're probably going to come back and change that. And I don't think schools largely are taking the or approach. I think they're largely following what lawmakers say they intended with it at this point. But nonetheless, cleanup language is probably going to surface. So another issue that we've already seen a bill filed that deals with the fluoridation of our water supplies. And this is something of interest to scientists, because it deals with whether or not people's oral health is improved by having fluoride in their water or not. Currently, Kentucky is one of a handful of states that require large water districts to add fluoride to water, which has been proven to be safe and effective, particularly important in a state with poor oral health. But there's been a growing debate in recent years from people who raise different concerns, largely just whether or not it's the role of government to make this decision to add something to the water supplies or not. But other issues that aren't necessarily science-based are supply chain issues, the fact that it could be hard to get fluoride, it could come from uncertain sources in foreign countries. So those are some of the issues. But the issues that really kind of grab the attention of the scientists who follow this are when people say fluoride in water is ineffective and unsafe, because you have to sort of cherry pick what you're looking at there. If you take the broad view of all the scientific evidence, you come down on the side of fluoride is safe and effective. So that's an issue that we'll continue to watch. There is growing concern, not just in Kentucky, but across the nation and around the world, about the PFAS forever chemicals that are in a number of products that we use, Teflon pans, food wrappers, firefighter gear. It's a byproduct in paper supply mills. So these forever chemicals that have strong bonds that essentially never break down now basically blanket our planet. You go to the most remote regions of our world and you find these trace chemicals in the environment, in the bloodstreams of animals, in the bloodstreams of each of us. And the experts say there is no healthy or safe level of these chemicals. So there's growing concern about them. Now, the federal government is sort of taking the lead on having a roadmap on how to deal with these issues. But on the state level, we have legislators, and it's been a bipartisan approach with both a Democrat and a Republican, to first of all raise awareness about these PFAS forever chemicals, and also come back with a bill this year that actually calls for lawmakers to create a PFAS working group so that they can start going forward on what actions, if any, the state should take about cleaning up these chemicals in our environment, keeping them out of our products, keeping them out of our water supply. The state executive branch currently does keep an eye on this issue and has done a number of tests on water supplies throughout the region. So they're compiling data about where these chemicals are found specifically in our water supplies. So as perhaps policies come to the fore, either from the federal government or from the state in months or years to come, the state's compiling the data to help know how to respond. One issue that's probably going to be of interest to a number of people here deals with tuition at our colleges and universities across the state. There is a proposal to freeze tuition for students currently in schools, as well as have a 5% cap on the increase of tuition for Kentucky residents coming into universities, or a 7% cap for non-residents. This is something, we've seen this proposal before, but it always gets lots of attention. And people struggle with it because on one hand, everyone wants college to be accessible and affordable. On the other hand, people want our schools to have the resources and the funds they need to operate at a peak level. One way to achieve both of those things would be for the state to step up with a higher appropriations for our post-secondary system. And that actually did happen last year. There was an increase in funding for post-secondary schools, but that comes after a bit of a history of years of that funding either being stagnant or in some years even being cut. So even though there's been some good progress recently, it's still a long ways to go. But we have a lot of people in our group concerned about the education system, so we are following that issue. An environmental issue that's making a return is a proposal to have a soil health program in Kentucky to make sure the soil across the state is healthy, that we have erosion control. This is a bill that has not even gotten a committee hearing in recent years, so its prospects of moving forward are slim. Nonetheless, soil affects all of us, so it's an issue that people continue to pay attention to. I mentioned before, lawmakers have done significant progress in recent years on improving literacy instruction. It appears like this year's session might be one where they try to make great headway on improvements in mathematics instructions. Math scores in Kentucky have gone down since approximately 2015. Some people note this is approximately around the time that teacher shortages also started getting more attention. But it's important to turn these math scores around. So other states have taken a comprehensive look at improving math instruction. Kentucky has looked at what they are doing. Our lawmakers have talked with some of the mathematics experts in the state, and they have put forth a proposal that, frankly, I don't know the details of it. I'm eager to see it come up in a committee hearing so it can be presented and discussed by all the experts. But the early word I'm hearing from the math experts across the state is that they are excited about the methodical approach lawmakers have taken to this issue and bringing something to the General Assembly to consider. Another bill that has gotten a good amount of attention already. You all probably know this. When a bill's covering a gamut of issues on a certain topic, they might refer to it as an omnibus bill. There's a bill that's referring to maternal health that has been dubbed the momnibus bill. So what that bill would do, it would ensure that pregnancy is a qualifying life event for insurance coverage. Currently, a lot of the coverage only covers the delivery, but not the prenatal and postnatal care that protects mothers. And this legislation that's been proposed would also go a long way towards boosting some of the efforts of the state's HANDS program, our early child development program that puts experts into homes to give new parents guidance on protecting their children's health. A couple issues that goes back to money in the state. So this will be part of the budget discussions, but child care services have been hurting across Kentucky. They've been propped up a bit by some of the stimulus spending, during the pandemic years. But as that money starts to go away, people are foreseeing or actually recognize it happening a child care crisis where there's not enough child care. That makes it harder for parents to take jobs and be gainfully employed and contribute to the state's tax base. So childcare is a critical issue that lawmakers are looking at putting millions of dollars into to try to improve, which some say that's not enough. Even more is needed. And then sort of a side issue to that is the possibility of more pre-care and kindergarten services throughout the state. Another one of those finance issues that's going to get attention in this session has to do with Medicaid reimbursement rates to doctors. Basically, if doctors aren't getting the payment for the services they provide to Medicaid recipients equal or to at least what's available in some of our bordering states, some of those doctors move to those bordering states. And it creates an issue where it's harder for people to have access to healthcare. So it's been 20 years since reimbursement rates have increased. It's important to the state's healthcare that get looked at and possibly increased this year. Teacher shortage is another issue that lawmakers continue to look at from a number of fronts. They look at what could be done, not just to raise teacher starting pay, but also the sort of the ceiling pay for teachers who have been in teaching for a long time. The governor's proposed budget, I believe, proposed an 11% raise for teachers. The legislature's approach, which mirrors the approach they've taken previously, is to increase school funding through the main school funding formula, the SEEK formula, and encourage that some of that money be used for teacher raises, but ultimately leaving the decisions up to the districts, whether the money goes there or to some of their other needs. I mentioned that medicinal cannabis was a big issue in last year's session, and it very well may make a return this year because last year's medicinal cannabis bill laid out a number of issues where people could use medicinal cannabis for those issues when the state's program goes into effect next year. The governor is now proposing adding 10 more medical conditions to that list for medicinal cannabis usage. So that could get some debate in this session. So there's a few other bills that we may return to later, but I'm glad now to say, well, I've given sort of the 10,000-foot view of what's happening in the legislature. We get to hear from a member of the House of Representatives, who I'm so glad Representative Lisa Wilner is with us today. She is a Democrat representative from Louisville. She is a psychologist. She is a former executive director of the Kentucky Psychological Association. So she certainly has the medical science background. She was among the outspoken voices against the anti-trans bill last year, and I see she's keeping busy this year because although the session just started, I see 15 bills filed under the name Lisa Wilner. So to give us an idea of how the session's going for her and the issues she's interested in, I'd like to welcome Representative Lisa Wilner.
Thank you so much, Rob. I really appreciate it. And I told Rob, I taught in the psychology department at Bellarmine for 20 years, and I really miss it. I really miss being with students. And so this opportunity to talk with you guys today is making my day at the end of a kind of a rough week in Frankfurt. So thank you guys for being here, and thank you, Rob, for inviting me. So I really, what I would love to do is to have, as much of a dialogue as is possible in this kind of a format. So I can talk a little bit about 2 or 3 of the bills that I have filed and am committed to. And then maybe if you have questions about the legislature in general, about any of the bills that are mine or that are other people's bills, or just about advocacy and how to engage with legislators. Anything you guys want to know, this is an Ask Me Anything 30 minutes. So feel free. Let's see, a couple of bills that I'll just talk really briefly about. One is House Bill 148, and this is the no pink tax bill. It's to get rid of taxation on menstrual products. I've had this bill in the past. This year's bill, I added a component that includes an appropriation for middle and high school public schools to provide feminine hygiene products free of charge, full access for students. And that addition really came to me from an 8th grader who had a successful initiative in her own school. And she advocated with me to add that to my bill, and I did. I don't think it's a bill that we're going to get passed, but Kentucky is now in the minority of states that profits essentially from the sale of feminine hygiene products by taxing those essential items. There's been a fair amount of study, a fair amount of data collected about the number of days of school missed by girls who are having their periods, especially those who are in precarious financial positions where they may not have access to safe and healthy products. So that's one of the bills. Another one that I'll talk about is a bill to end the statute of limitations on childhood sexual abuse. This is a really important bill. You guys may be aware that Kentucky for a number of years has been #1 in child abuse, is rated, at the bottom of states in terms of child safety on a number of different measures. And there's even some evidence that suggests that because of Kentucky's lax laws about protecting children and from sexual abuse in particular, that Kentucky has become kind of a haven for serial predators. So what we know about children who've experienced childhood sexual abuse, most of them never, ever, ever disclose that. The vast majority do not. For those who do disclose and want to, seek some sort of justice or some sort of to seek restitution from their abusers, the average age for a child who was abused, the average age to take action is 52. The current statute of limitations is 10 years past the age of majority. So once you're past 28, if you ever, one ever comes to terms with that history of childhood sexual abuse, too bad, you have no legal recourse in the state of Kentucky. So that really needs to be addressed. And then the last bill that I'll mention now, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion, is a bill to ban the really dangerous, discredited practice called conversion therapy. conversion therapy is an attempt to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. These efforts have been wildly discredited. It was back in the 1970s when the American Psychiatric Association dropped homosexuality as a disorder. Thanks to advocacy from people with science backgrounds, talking about the evidence that this was not only an ineffective treatment, but a dangerous treatment. We've unfortunately got people in the state who hold a license to practice health services who are practicing conversion therapy. And I have to use the air quotes because it's not therapy. Therapy is something that helps people. This is a really harmful initiative, a harmful effort. We know that young people who have experienced conversion therapy type treatments are much more likely to have suicide attempts. And you may know that for LGBTQ young people, suicide attempt rates, suicidal thoughts are already much higher than in the general population. And there's a variety of reasons for that that have nothing to do with the sexual orientation or gender identity itself. So there we go. There's some bills. I see that there's lots in the chat, but I'm not reading the chat. So Rob, do you want to be the MC on that, on the questions?
Sure, sure. A lot of the chat has been people introducing themselves as we ask them to do. So
Wonderful,
so
wonderful.
we can invite people now to ask questions. You can either pipe up or go ahead and put it in the chat. But I'll ask a first question, which is as you interact with other lawmakers on the effort to ban conversion therapy, which shouldn't be called therapy,
Right.
are you getting any feedback that gives you hope that things are changing?
I will say we had the most momentum with this bill maybe 3 or 4 years ago. We had a lot of bipartisan sponsorship. And the reason for that, the reason for that was that the Ban Conversion Therapy organization itself, a number of the mental health associations, the Kentucky Psychological Association, the Kentucky Association of Social Workers, a number of groups were very actively advocating and asking their legislators to sign on to this bill. We had some really productive conversations about how dangerous this treatment is across the aisle, and I had a lot of support for it. And even people who may have some antipathy in general toward LGBTQ causes were saying, well, but this is a mental health issue. This is a suicide risk. This is really dangerous, and I absolutely support this bill. I will say that there's been a bit of a sea change. The last election cycle brought in a lot more legislators who I think are absolutely anti-science in their stance, will lift up a lot of junk science, as we saw with Senate Bill 150 last session, to ban gender affirming care across the state, making Kentucky a really dangerous state for trans and non-binary youth. So we're trending in the wrong direction on ban conversion therapy. I'm sorry to say, but and I even had a little bit of a battle last year with some of the advocates who suggested that I not file the bill because we were in such a hostile environment. And I felt very strongly, and I still feel strongly, that even if a bill can't pass, we still need to put good policies out there. We need for people who are vulnerable and who are affected by these horrible policies to know that there are people in Frankfurt fighting for them and fighting for the science, fighting for what the evidence shows. We need for people to know that even if we're not in the majority, even if we're not on the winning side. And I will say that some of those advocates who discouraged me from filing the bill reached out to me and said, "You were right. Thank you for sticking with it. You were right. We were wrong." Which, who doesn't love to hear that? You were right. Anyway, but that was a fight I was not expecting to have with the bill's, past supporters. So there are a lot of surprising things that can happen in the the messiness of a legislative session.
Now, I've got more questions, but let me open it up to others. Anyone's welcome to either jump in with your comments, go ahead and unmute yourself, or raise your hand and I'll call on you, or put your question in the chat. And I'm going to start right now with Carly Combs has a question.
Hi, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Carly. I'm a senior at Thomas More University. I wanted to continue talking about this ban bill. I was interested. So you said that these people are certified, they're doing this therapy. How are they going about getting a certification for something like that? I mean,
It's not a
there's no
certification.
science backing that. I just wasn't sure I understood that.
Right. Carly, it's a great question. It's nice to meet you, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. So to be a mental health practitioner in the state of Kentucky, you have to hold a license. You hold a license as a licensed psychologist, which is what I have. You could have a license as a licensed clinical social worker, as a licensed counselor. And so it's not a certification specifically for conversion therapy. There are licensing boards that oversee practice, but those licensing boards are an extension. They are part of the executive branch. The licensing boards can only follow the laws of the state. The licensing boards put regulations in place, but the regulations can't contradict or can't go against what's in statute. So the vast majority of our licensed mental health providers across Kentucky, I'm happy to say, they and their organizations support the bill to ban the practice. But we have individual, sort of rogue practitioners who engage in this, from my perspective, unethical and dangerous and, disproven treatment. And without a law in place that explicitly bans it, it leaves the licensing board's hands tied. So there was a specific case where a Kentuckian who's now an adult received treatment as a minor from a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Kentucky, received, conversion therapy treatment to try to change this person's sexual orientation. A lot of times kids are taken for this treatment by their parents who don't know any better, who have fears or concerns that, oh my gosh, my child is gay, what's going to happen? This is terrible. And instead of affirming, learning, trying to understand, it's like, we've got to fix my kid, and like seeing this as an inherent brokenness, which no one in the scientific community supports. And so you've got well-meaning parents who might take their kids for this kind of treatment. It was taken to a court case. The social work board was not able to do anything on the instance of conversion therapy. They could not administer any kind of sanctions for that specifically. Sadly, this licensed clinical social worker had also engaged in predatory kinds of behaviors, and so did end up losing his license for at least for a 3-year period. But it was based on other concerns, other inappropriate behaviors, and not on the conversion therapy itself. So that's the bind we're in without this law. And I know that was a really long and maybe technical answer, but did that help, Carly? Okay. Thank you for the question. Thank you. And I mean, it raises another issue, is that we have people practicing these kinds of sexual orientation, gender identity change efforts who are not licensed. They might be operating out of church basements or as, life coaches or as some kind of non-licensed, anybody can say I'm a life coach and put it on a business card. Or, there are other, they can say I'm a therapist and they can call themselves that without a license. And so really as a state, we have no way, but through the law, through statute, to try to get a hold of that. So the best we can do is say if somebody is granted a license by the state of Kentucky, they should not be practicing, they should not be providing treatments that are discredited by every mental health and medical field.
Just curious, is there a proposed penalty for those that break that law?
That would be the way the law is currently drafted. That would leave it to the licensing boards. I think the best policy doesn't get too micromanagey, right? And leaves it to the experts. And we've seen a lot of legislation come through. The Senate Bill 150 last year was a great example where we're trying to legislate the practice of medicine in really dangerous ways. So my bill stays away from that level and really leaves it to the experts. And what we've heard from our licensing boards is that they need this. They need this bill in order to be able to administer sanctions for this particular kind of, unethical and dangerous behavior. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Wilner, it's good to see you. There's a question in the chat that I think is an important one. I think it was meant for you. Rebecca asked, how do we get more pro-science candidates to run for office?
Oh, gosh. Yes, all of you guys need to be, that's a question for all of us on this call, I think. We need not only pro-science, but scientists in the legislature. I will tell you, like on a hopeful note, that I'm able individually to go meet with people on the other side of the aisle, maybe not with those who are adamantly anti-science, but because of my own experience, my knowledge base, my background, I'm able to go sit down with a colleague and say, look, here's what the science says. And like we're in the room together. We need so many more psychologists, physicians, scientists of every stripe in the legislature. So because then it gives the opportunity to build these relationships and to try to educate folks. That's much easier to do, I think, from the inside than the outside. But it's also super, super important from the outside. I would love to see the Kentucky Academy of Science. I know you guys administer a survey to candidates. What is your stance on science issues? I would love to see you guys like ramp that up, maybe more publicity, maybe have endorsements. I think everybody on this call can be very active about encouraging friends and colleagues to run, people who are willing to enter the fray. And I will say, when I was campaigning, when I was speaking with voters, I first ran for the legislature in 2018, so my first term was 2019. I was in a three-way primary for an open seat. One of the things that I would say at the door was, I'm a licensed psychologist. I'm the executive director of the Kentucky Psychological Association. I'm really interested in mental health policy. I'm really interested in policy that keeps that increases public health and therefore increases public safety. That was a message that voters were very, very eager to hear. You know, I honestly think that the other two, my two opponents arguably had more political connections, more political experience in some ways, but I think voters at the door really resonated with that message. And so I think finding candidates who are willing to put a pro-science message forward, I think that's key. And anyway, I do think that every one of us has a role to play in terms of finding people who are willing to be the voice of evidence, the voice of reason, the voice of empiricism, you know, within the body.
And just to quickly follow up on that, we did a little informal study. I know Madison, she's posted some things in the chat as well. She's been heavily involved in this and the surveys and such, but I think this was several years ago. I came up with 4 people in the Kentucky General Assembly who fit into the STEM category. So, you know,
Right.
we don't have a lot.
We don't. No, we don't. We could certainly use more. And I mean, it's a sacrifice, right? You know, it's like people who are starting their careers or in the midst of their careers. It's time off from work. It's time away from family. It's a hard job, but it's a critically important job. You know, I'm always so kind of floored by people who say, I don't pay attention to politics or I don't care what happens in Frankfurt. You may not care, but it's going to happen whether you care or not, and it's going to affect you. It will affect you. And so, you know, as friends of mine have said, you know, it's like you can either be at the table or you can be on the menu. And the Kentucky Academy of Science definitely needs to be at the table because you've seen already that science has been on the menu.
Yeah, just following up on that, that reminds me of a comment that I remember hearing from one of our keynote speakers at our annual meeting last year, who basically said if scientists don't step up and speak out on issues, someone pretending or portraying to be scientists are going to stand up and speak out on the issues. So
well said, Rob. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And my question actually was related to that. There are national surveys showing that scientists are still among the most trusted voices in civic discourse.
Yep.
And that's really encouraging to know. But again, like there's just not a lot of people in public service and in political positions. So I would just, yeah, I think people who are here today are interested in this, and I'm really glad to see like the breadth of expertise that we have showing up here, just scanning, you know, people who are in the chat. So I'm really thankful to all of you for showing up and yeah, leaning into this. It's really important and we need it more in Kentucky.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your voice matters. Your voice matters. Your expertise matters. Your passion matters. And, you know, we need to hear from you in Frankfurt. We need to hear from you. Thank you, Amanda.
the next question in our chat comes from Maria Torrey, who asks if you could describe your day-to-day experience as a legislator to help give folks an idea of what it would mean to get involved at that level or in a similar capacity.
I'm hesitating a little bit just because every day is different. Every day is different, which is, I guess, part of what makes it fun and interesting. There's no routine to it really, but I will say, so we're in session on odd number years. We're in session for 30 days. On even years, we're in session for 60 days, starting the first Tuesday after the first Monday in January. So this year we started on January 2nd. We will, by constitutional, by the Kentucky Constitution, we have to end by April 15th. This is a long session year. So for 60 days this year, I'm driving back and forth to Frankfurt. Folks who I'm in Louisville, I'm about 55 minutes away from the capital. There are folks who obviously drive much longer distances. For them, many of them rent a place during session, and they're in Frankfurt every day, go home on weekends. So depending where you live, it can, that changes the day-to-day aspect of it. I have typically my day starts with constituent meetings or members of organizations who, like the Kentucky Nursing Association I've just met with, the Kentucky Pharmacist Association I just met with. I just had a meeting with Rob, who's not a constituent, but he was there representing the Kentucky Academy of Science. So those kinds of, 10 to 15 minute kind of short informal meetings, hearing what people's legislative priorities are, what their concerns are. Then I'll have committee meetings. The committee meetings to me are my favorite part because I love learning new stuff. And, we get to hear from experts. We get to hear about real issues. We get to hear ideas for real solutions. Unfortunately, increasingly, we're also hearing really bad, really dangerous bills. Yesterday, the Judiciary Committee heard House Bill 5, which is the Safer Kentucky Act, which is really a war on poor people. That's all it is. It's a really cruel bill. But committee meetings where there's opportunity for questions, to learn more about the bills, to learn more about the issues at hand, and to hear from experts. This is an opportunity for you guys at committee meetings. People can sign up to speak. So if you know that there's an issue where a certain issue is going to be discussed in committee, you can sign up to speak either in support of or in opposition to something that's on a committee agenda. And if you have an issue that's in your wheelhouse, that's in your area of expertise, that can be so helpful and so valuable. After committee meetings, we will typically caucus. So the House Democratic Caucus will meet together. We'll hear, these are the bills that we think we're going to be hearing this week. These are the bills that are coming up in committee. What strategies do we have? What are the experts saying? Sometimes we have experts come in and meet with the full caucus. And I say full caucus, there are only 20 of us in my caucus, 20 out of 100. But still, it's an opportunity to reach 20 legislators all at once. Then we go into session. There are a lot of formalities in session. Session and committees, by the way, are televised on KET. They do a fantastic job of making the procedures as transparent as possible for people. And those are archived, so you can go back and watch, for example, the testimony that was given on Senate Bill 150 and the argument last year, and the arguments that were made for and against that really despicable bill. So that's an opportunity for legislators to stand up to, I say, quote, debate bills. There's really not a lot of debate currently. Rob was there involved with the legislature at a time when maybe things were a little more balanced and maybe there was a little bit more honest back and forth. But, I know that I have sometimes changed my view, my perspective on a bill. I thought I was going to vote one way, and then somebody says something persuasive on the House floor, and I end up voting another way. And I know that I've said things that have influenced votes. So we do that. I typically, on my drive home, I have phone calls with constituents, phone calls with advocates, on my drive home, and then I get home and prepare for the next day, see what's on the agenda, and it starts all over again. During the interim, and I'm just going to mention this really briefly, we're only in session 30 days or 60 days, but we exist as legislators year round. And I really encourage folks, I encourage all of you to get to know your legislators And a great time to do that is during the interim. When we're back home, we're back in our districts, we're not under the pressure of session every single day. It's a great time to introduce yourself, offer to take them to coffee, get to know them, invite them to something going on at your school, at your place of study. Invite them to be part of a panel, invite them, whatever. Make contact with folks during the interim, build those relationships so that they know who you are, that when you reach out to them, they know this is somebody I can trust. It's like, oh yeah, I remember Carly. I had that great conversation with her over the summer. So I can't stress the importance of the interim enough. There's so much focus on session, but as again, we exist year round and should be available to you, our constituents, 365 days a year.
Well, Representative Wilner, we cannot thank you enough for making the time to join us today. We wish you the best going forward with this year's session and a safe time with all the snow out there as well.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be with all of you guys. Thank you for what you're doing. Please keep up the good work, and I hope to see you in Frankfurt.
Thank you
Bye.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, how I wish she had not left. I think my question would be best, maybe I should just channel my question to her. And my question is coming as a result of the difficulty I encountered during one of the classes I took during fall semester. So I was trying to get data from Eastern Kentucky, weather data, temperature, and precipitation data across the state of Kentucky. So I noticed that, during my quest to getting this data, I was unable to get real-time weather data across eastern axis of Kentucky, especially around Floyd County. I was unable to get any data from Floyd County. So I was wondering what is happening. And I was made to understand that, that axis, especially the eastern axis of Kentucky, had suffered some level of neglect. It is not just, to put out legislators out there. I understand that, our legislators are working, really hard to ensure that everything, is okay across board in Kentucky. But, that axis in terms of infrastructure, they have suffered some level of neglect. So I would have loved for our legislator to, to talk to this in terms of how well are these legislatures, how well does it impact the people of Eastern Kentucky,
Yeah.
So that is my question.
Sure. That is a great question. And I will look into that and let you know what I find out, because we do have connections with some of the people who run the state's Mesonet system, which is operated out of Western Kentucky University. But
I am an ambassador. I am an ambassador of the Kentucky Mesonet team.
okay. So, they're getting real-time I'll just explain for other people. They're getting real-time information from weather stations across the state. And you mentioned Floyd County, and I recently heard about just in recent days, they're having a bigger footprint in Floyd County. I don't know if that means they installed a weather station or what, but there's something on that front in the Prestonsburg area.
Yes. I
yeah.
am championing that. I am championing that because when I went there in person, I went there in person, to see for myself and my professor, we went there and I was like, oh my God, I was unable to spot a weather station because I tried to see if I can get, because I have a restoration project that I'm doing, at Floyd County, in one of the schools in Floyd County. So I spoke with my supervisor about it, and he happens to be the director of the Kentucky Mesonet, and he was like, okay, we are going to see how we can site a station, a weather station right there. So I was like, what has been done over the years, over time? Even the Cooperative Observer program are not there. It's also a network. It's also a weather station, a network. I couldn't find any, and these are historical, weather station. So this happens to be a problem I encountered during, my my work last semester, and I would like to provide solution. I would like to help. I would like to assist in any little way. So I just want you guys to look, into that and see how we can, be of help to assist the people of Floyd County.
I
Okay.
wasn't aware of is it a broadband issue, or is it just the fact that they don't have one?
The only weather station that I saw was located at Prestonsburg, and I can tell you for free that weather station is not working. All right. So where I have my project is centered, around the eastern axis, the Floyd County itself. I don't want to put the school on the line. There is a school right there, that I'm working on. So there were no weather station that can serve that axis. So I was surprised. I was very, very surprised. The only station I can get was located at Prestonsburg, and when I made my preliminary investigation, the station is a co-op station, a cooperative observers network. It wasn't working, So I couldn't get anything to do, and I just got stuck, and that prompted me to discuss with my supervisor, who happens to be a key person at the Mesonet, and going forward, we are looking at citing, having a weather station right there.
Yeah, let's follow up offline. Amanda posted her email and Rob email in the chat. So if you want to, grab that and write that down, maybe we could follow up on that offline.
Yeah.
All right, sir.
I'll look into it and respond.
All right, sir.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you. So I want to go ahead and introduce our next speaker with the UofL Science and Policy Outreach Group. Camille Rash is going to be, I believe, talking about the work of that group. The acronym is SPOG, as well as a fellowship she's involved in. So Camille, if you are ready, we are eager to hear from you.
Hi, yeah, let me just get this pulled up. Oh, the host has disabled screen sharing. I had a few slides to go through, but I can also just speak if that's okay.
Hang on, no, I can give you access. Hang on just a second. Okay, go ahead now and see if you can share.
Oh, now my computer's not happy with me.
Oh.
Maybe. It's okay. I can just speak and we can share the
Or if
slide.
you want, yeah, that's fine. Or
If-
if you want to email them to me, can you email them to me and I could share them?
I might have it done.
In the meantime, let me just remind everybody, I know some people showed up late, that we meet during the session, we meet every other Wednesday at 12:30. So please join us. We have lots of work to do. There's lots of bills that are going to be filed between now and April. So feel free to join us. The emails are in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, I might have it taken care of now. Oh, if it wants to, no, that's not it. There we go. Okay. I think that's up now. So my name is Camille Rashi. I'm a 5th year PhD student here at the University of Louisville studying immunology, and I'm the Secretary Marketing Chair for SPOG. I'll start with what SPOG is known for and what we do. So we're really involved, there we go. We're really involved in a lot of outreach and volunteering events around Louisville. We usually have a table at Kentucky Science Center events like the Brain Days, where we host a table for kids to come up and learn about STEM careers and try on a lab coat and do some fun activities. We also are partners with Louisville Science Pathways, which is a program that brings local high school students to UofL research labs over the summer as for a paid internship, for which the applications for summer 2024 will open this weekend. And I'm happy to provide more information if anybody knows a high school student that would be interested in that. And we also play a really big role in the Louisville Science and Engineering Fair, coordinating graduate students to visit with each presenting middle school or high school student to talk about their project after official judging. My personal favorite part of being a part of all of these events is being able to discuss with the parents and the adults who also attend the events about science policy issues and how they can be involved, and when they ask us questions as researchers about our opinions on the ongoing issues. So just a really quick plug. I want to mention that you can follow us on social media and learn more about these events that we'll be at. And we try to keep our socials up to date, but sometimes, I mean, we're graduate students, we fall behind. That's a dig at me personally. I've fallen behind, but and for direct contact or to join our email list, you can send us an email at spog@louisville.edu. But the main topic that I want to speak on today is I recently completed a science policy fellowship with the Federation of American Societies for Experimental Biology, and I feel like it really gave good insight into what a science policy career would look like, especially as we were discussing earlier, wanting more scientists and researchers to join that policy field and really get involved more directly. So for the fellowship itself, they have this opportunity every year. They usually take graduate students that are further along in their PhD candidacy. And I'm not sure when these applications open up for 2024. I'm happy to reach out and ask them if anybody's interested. And there are a lot of other member societies that have similar fellowships, and a lot of people I talked with at FASIB and who work for them had done some of these other fellowships and gotten involved. But for this one, it really lines up well with what we're discussing today, because it's kind of a create your own, choose your path, where I was personally given a lot of freedom to pick projects to work on, though it seems most policy fellowships have this similar structure. Personally, I created fact sheets about various subjects that I felt needed more attention, such as getting researchers more involved in science policy, monitoring the Federal Register every day, writing responses to some of those proposals, and then writing articles or summaries for upcoming changes for other staff members and our member societies. So like I said, a lot of the fact sheets I created focused on and were centered around providing resources for graduate students to learn about science policy careers and advocacy. So kind of to start with that, it's always thrown around this term science policy. And I know me personally, I didn't really understand what that was until I came to graduate school, joined SPOG, and really started learning more. So it relates to any rules or regulations concerning the allocation of resources for the conduct of science towards the goal of best serving the public. And it really makes more sense to me if it's sectioned off into two groups, for science for policy or policy for science. And so the science for policy is more researcher focused and using scientific information to advise on policy issues. So there are some ways you can become an advocate from the bench, like serving on a federal advisory committee or responding to requests for information regarding proposed changes. Comparatively, the policy for science side is more about getting deeper into that science policy and regulation portion as a bridge between research and the big lawmakers. So that is going from a research career into more of that policy career, which we need more of, as we've been discussing. This includes like analyzing federal or state agency decisions, discussing proposed changes with researchers, and providing that information to lawmakers. And some really key resources that I have identified that, again, I didn't have much knowledge of before, especially before graduate school, before really understanding science policy. And these are resources that anybody can use to get into more and stay up to date on the policies undergoing. This main one I mentioned earlier is the Federal Register. It's updated daily with published documents from federal agencies, and it's separated into sections based on the related department. For example, there's the Environmental Protection Agency. They have their own section, Human Health Services, or the National Science Foundation, where they publish documents that are proposing changes that will happen or noting what changes have previously happened. Going through the Federal Register, because it is updated daily, can be a pretty tedious task. So an easier way, or like a more slowly getting integrated way, would be pretty simple, as just shifting your social media to include science policy topics. You can do this by following your lawmakers' accounts, setting alerts for specific hashtags, and actively engaging in posts or articles related to your topics of interest. However, we all know that you can't believe everything you read on the internet, and so you should be fact-checking a lot of these topics and articles to make sure you're sharing that accurate information, especially coming from a scientist, as we've discussed that some scientists are still very well regarded as being knowledgeable and trustworthy in these fields. And so kind of along those lines, if you have a specific topic or interest you want to see changes in, or you need to speak out, you can directly make connections and make your voice be heard by writing or calling members of your local Congress. And just some tips for that is, I guess maybe the best tip for that is to be sure to introduce yourself, as we had kind of mentioned before was a topic. Explain who you are, why you're qualified to speak on this topic, and acknowledge why you want to speak to that legislator. This can be pretty hard, especially coming from an introvert, to just reach out and make those big jumps, but having your voice be heard is one of the best ways a researcher, and specifically a student researcher, can get involved. I will say, as a student researcher, in any of these connections, you don't need to say what school you go to just to protect the university from getting angry at you. Is the only another tip that I would have, just to like protect yourself from the university. With that, I know that was really quick, but I'll take any questions, and I know that was mostly geared towards the students, but I'm happy to talk more about some of the federal side of things, and also just share the details for our Louisville Science Pathways application and how that works. Questions?
Okay. While we give a moment to see if what's added to the chat, I'll just ask, I don't know if SPOG has identified the main issues of the legislative session that you want to keep an eye on or advocate on this year, but I'll just ask, is there a top issue that you all are following?
I think one of the top issues is still those trans rights bills, just because we do try to be, the university also tries to be really inclusive and accommodating for everybody, and seeing that be actively torn against is hard for anybody to understand. And so, especially because we are on the medical school campus, we have a lot of medical students who help volunteer, and getting their voices heard as well shares that those laws, that legislature will make it really hard for them to practice in the future, or make them not want to practice in Kentucky, because they'd then be scared to make some of these calls and give these treatments, especially if it's turned against and teachers and the other members of society are being told to not believe these students. So I think that's usually one of our biggest ideas or focuses.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. I don't see any other questions now, so let me.
I have a quick question. Is the SPOG, I know it's through UofL, but do you have community members who can be a part, or students who are attending universities that don't have programs or groups that might be able to do this? Could they be involved with this organization?
Yeah, so we are open to just about anybody. We are happy to share emails and volunteer opportunities. We have done some policy updates in the past for things to pay attention to, things specifically more geared towards students to pay attention to, but we are always happy to hear back from others. And if anybody needs, if members of the community need volunteers to come help at an event, we're always happy to provide that and work with anybody around us, really.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So before I move on, Camille, I just want to make sure, was that the entirety of SPOG's presentation?
Yes.
You were okay. I want to make sure you were handling all the speaking duties, which you did wonderfully. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So for these final minutes, I'll just wrap up as well as talk about what's ahead as we go towards the second and final advocacy workshop, which will be on February the 9th. But first, some of the advocacy methods that I just wanted to make sure got mentioned today is the fact that really anyone, anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection, can follow what's happening in the General Assembly and have an impact pretty much in real time. As we've already heard, everything is available live on video, whether it's committee meetings or chamber proceedings. Every single day, the website is updated so you can see the latest version of legislation, exactly where each bill stands in the process, what the schedules are as far as what's going to be looked at in committee as well as in the chambers each day. Lawmakers' contact information, so you could call an 800 number and give input on the bills or send them emails or find their Twitter handle and tag them if you make a tweet. That's another good way to get a response out of a legislator or make sure your issue gets noticed. So as long as you have a connection and look at the General Assembly website, you'll find you can do a lot. The website has a ton of information. It's laid out pretty clearly, but there's such voluminous information on it. If you need any guidance on doing what you want to accomplish with legislative advocacy, I'll just say, give me a call anytime. I do know the website pretty well, and I'm happy to help you zero in on anything you would like to find there. So as I mentioned, every time an amendment gets filed to a bill, it will automatically pop up on the web page. So I'll be glad to help anyone navigate through that if you like. As we approach our next meeting, you can expect to receive an email from me, sort of asking for your input on which issues you care most about during this legislative session. That will help inform us to put together advocacy alerts to share with each of you as the issues you care about move through the process. For example, maybe we'll say this issue that's your main issue is getting ready to come up for a vote in the House. Here's who you might want to contact to make your voice heard. So we're trying to do action alerts based on your priorities that makes it easy for everyone to have a stronger voice in the process. So you can expect that. And as far as what we're going to do in our next meeting on February the 9th, we once again have great speakers lined up. I know everybody enjoys hearing tips from students who have been successful in advocacy. So we will hear from students at UK with the Casper Group, I believe Kentucky Association for Science Policy and Research, as well as we've got another couple key legislators who will be speaking with us. Senator Brandon Smith is the chair of the Natural Resources and Energy Committee. So everyone who cares about environmental issues will have a chance to talk with a key legislator. And Senator Chris McDaniel, the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, will also be with us. So another key person who has oversight and influence on how millions upon millions of dollars are spent in our state. We'll have an opportunity to talk with them in our next meeting. So that will be very worthwhile. And we will have a sort of a panel discussion with some of the top advocates who work in our Capitol each day. So that is something we can all look forward to for our next meeting. And I'll just ask if there's any final questions before we close things up.
I have a quick question. Are there
Sure.
any planned sessions relating to computer science and/or mathematics?
Yeah, as far as what to expect coming up in the legislature, is that
Yeah.
right? Yes. So I've seen cybersecurity legislation filed. So that is something that, assuming it moves forward, would get a hearing. And I believe on that issue, a bill went far in the last session, but didn't quite make the final hurdle. So just based on what we've seen in the past, the movement of the bill, we might once again see it move along far enough that it will start getting public airings, and we can make sure people are aware of that. And on the mathematics, yes. Last year, lawmakers called in representatives from the Kentucky Center for Mathematics to talk about their work and math scores in Kentucky and how there might be improvements going forward. So they held 2 math summits across the state to get input from educators or anyone who cares about mathematics instruction in Kentucky. They compiled all the information they received. I believe they've worked to share it with lawmakers. That's informed lawmakers with a bill they've put together on overhauling mathematics instruction in Kentucky. So I think it might even be the chair of an education committee who filed that legislation, which means you can you can more likely expect that it's going to come up on a committee agenda. So yeah, both of the issues you mentioned, there are bills out there, and I expect we'll be hearing more on those.
Anything on AI?
We haven't seen anything on AI. Is that right, Rob?
That's surprising.
I'm also surprised by that. Yeah, we're something we sort of flagged in our last meeting that we were interested and concerned about.
Yeah, and I haven't seen anything directly yet, but I'll also say if there's, say, 300 bills filed so far at this point, there's probably another 600 or 700 to come. So we haven't seen most of the bills that are going to be introduced this year. AI is a huge issue. I wouldn't be surprised at all if something along those lines comes up. Yeah, go ahead.
I think Reggie Thomas filed a bill,
I was going to say, I think he had something about it.
Yeah, something about K through 12 education and AI, but I don't, we can quickly look it up, but I believe
Oh yeah,
at least one thing has been filed, but I don't know the details of it.
you're right about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you are right.
There's also a lot on health and medical. So I was, scanning the expertise of people in the room. Like whatever your discipline is, we would love for you to help us review bills. But particularly if you have any interest or expertise in health and medical, we would love to have your expertise when we review bills, and we can send a follow-up email with some links to help people get involved and do that. We really would love all of you to help us with that process.
Yeah. If you stay online after the meeting ends, I'll do a quick check in the index of legislative subjects, and I'll see if there's anything else on AI, and I'll put a link to Senator Thomas's bill that's been filed. So if you stay on after the meeting, within a couple minutes, I'll have links to resources.
Yeah, and
But-
just want to say I appreciate everybody for being here. This is a great group. Next week is going to be interesting, and I mean not next week, but the next meeting like this is going to be especially interesting because we have two people from the majority party, which is something we haven't had. So it should be interesting. Hope everyone can join us.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. This is the third year we've done these sessions. I'm glad to say that they have grown every year. So greatly appreciate your interest and your input. And we look forward to seeing you again on February the 9th. Thank you all.